It is always difficult to discuss when and how a caliphate would be restored. But I do believe we are in the transitional period, historically speaking, of the time period where we could, where the ability to do so exists very clearly and unquestionably. America is, regardless of people's opinions, retreating. She's already been talking, like she did during the Trump period, about the withdrawal of bases across Europe. We are seeing the conflicts in Belarus with our brothers and sisters who are desperate for just some peace and prosperity. There is no other opportunity more gracious than this. But how would we finance such a movement as a restored caliphate? A simple request for financial alms across the Ummah would be considered the norm. And as I've said in my previous video, a single pound a month would be incredibly powerful. A vast amount of wealth and a considerable amount of reserved time and resources. With that kind of financial backing, we could lift ourselves in building our first cities. Now the horrid question is where? Where does a restored Ummah start? Maybe it's fanciful of me, maybe it's delusional if you like, but I've always perceived that the West can be saved from its own sins, that Islam can restore Europe to a moral place of social structure, that Islam will save Europe as Europe will save the Muslims. And from there, from the heart of Europe, could we give birth to a new caliphate? What is this perspective that it has to be in the Holy Lands or amongst many of the old territories conquered by our first caliphs? But yet, the place that everyone retreats to is a place of safety. It is entirely imperishable that we could restore a caliphate around the European people. I myself, less than a year ago, would have thought these ideas ludicrous. Alhamdulillah, here I am, a Muslim. And I don't mean from a violent point of view. At no point do I ever support violence or anything upon its actions. But it is an important point of view to hold that a restored Ummah is not only possible, it is practical. The fitna, the disgusting and unmitigated sins that are engaged across the whole of Europe, the way that the French treat us to this day. We know we are the chosen children by how much we are persecuted. Take a look at how our brothers and sisters are treated in Belgium, in Germany, that we is our last refuge, but in France, we're under siege. Alhamdulillah for Islam. For being under that siege does not scare me in any way, shape or form. Like the Chinese will understand, the French and everyone else, anyone who attacks Islam is destined to be ruined by Allah or embrace the very thing they hate. So I consider the harm that is caused in France a temporary thing. All of the historical markers that we need, all of the habituated abilities to rebuild an ummah are there, waiting for us in Europe, for merely having the courage to put them together and restore a caliphate away from the corruption and the absolute tyranny of the Middle East and Africa. But let us be honest here. Where did these tyrannical leaders come from? You have to stretch your minds back to the 50s and 60s to truly know the birthplace of many of the early tyrants, or the 19th century, where weapons were passed to certain individuals to unseat the aging and may or may not be corrupt Ottoman Empire. But you know full well, in the shadows, manipulating the lives of everyone around them, we have the banker, the politician, the industrialists of the 19th century. And we all know which countries these came from, and who sent them, and why they sent them. For profit was their goal, money was their church, greed was their creed. And they have come and they have unseated and unhoused so many of our brothers and sisters in the Ummah. Therefore, as a historian, there is a certain level of poetic justice and amusement that we should consider rebuilding the Ummah inside of Europe upon itself. A land that offers us the freedom to express ourselves, whilst its liberal democracy is in essence alien to who we are. Now, at no point do I wish to harm the liberals and the isms amongst us, but to change society one must be willing to be disciplined, to not interact with them, to maintain amongst our own and grow, to preach, to proselytize. The path of peaceful expansion is never easy. It is treaded with considerable gripe and footfall. For every Muslim that every human who embraces Islam is a victory. To every Western daughter and Western son who marry into a Muslim family is in itself another victory. The slow march of peaceful absorption is our greatest weapon in the West. For everything they accuse us of terrorism, of fanaticism, of all of these isms that they also perpetratively in their today's morality, tomorrow's fads, we continue to hold on to our deen as if it was a rock made of hot irons. To when this future caliphate would be born, I could not possibly answer the question. Maybe in my lifetime, maybe in the next, who knows? Alhamdulillah, many say we are merely awaiting the arrival of the apocalypse. But I, for one, hope or dream that it is a far-off place than today. We may not know the hour that the time Allah calls us, but that by itself should generate hope. It should generate peace, and we should continue our march forward in Europe with Quran in hand, Hadith on our heart, and a mind to save as many lost souls as humanly possible. For it is the saving of each and individual human being and bringing them into the embrace of Islam that makes us the better people. For nothing born of violence generates anything more than violence. For Islam to grow, we must remain on this path, as treacherous as it looks. I thank you for your time in listening to my second ramblings about a restored caliphate. I'm not entirely sure if I'll do another one. Now, to get to when will a caliphate be restored in this dunya without the Mahdi? Because this is a conversation that there is a section of the Muslim world that refuses to even acknowledge that the caliphate can be restored. I mean, let's be fair about that. People will call us pipe dreamers or enthusiasts of the past, but it is no more than a spark, an idea, a dream to rebuild what we have lost, to expand and restore peacefully. I cannot stress how much to say this. Peacefully restore the Caliphate is within the means of this ummah. It is. And anybody who says otherwise is lying. Anybody who says that we can't restore it. I mean, we've seen the Arab uprisings across the entire Middle East. We've seen the replacement of long-term political despots. There is nothing to say that the Ummah could not restore a caliphate. Now, I fear that that may one day come from violence. That's never my intention. This isn't the intention of these, in many ways, podcasts or historical ramblings, reminders and affirmations. My goal is to bring us to a point where we think about these problems, where we give thought, where we have a conversation amongst ourselves, where we ask these questions, because so few people do these days. You don't hear the venerable and beloved Muhammad Hijab talking about them. You don't hear of Ali Dawah talking about them. You'll never hear anybody supported from within a certain group of sponsored Dawah clerics and Dawah speakers and sheikhs, because it's not in the interest of those countries to even speak about a caliphate. For the very memory of the caliphate, and this is why the perpetration that the caliphate will never return until the Mahdi comes. This is perpetrated by a certain vicious small cycle of clerics. But historically it can. There is absolutely no reason why we could not, as an ummah, restore a caliphate. The very nature that people think that this is impossible is laughable, in my opinion. The political upheavals, the idea that the West in it upon itself is invincible, that the rise of Chinese power means that we don't have an opportunity to seize the destiny of every man, woman and child in this Muslim ummah. We do. And more people need to genuinely think about restoring what we have lost. For an ummah run by a caliph will solve many of the wounds inside the Muslim world. Thank you for listening. I must admit I am intrepid to whether or not I'll upload this. But it is from the heart. And I cannot stress upon this 10-minute talk of mine that the restoration of a caliphate must be done peacefully. Like a recommendable watch of the great Gandhi. Nothing done in violence ever returned anything but violence.